America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Jordan Bruno, Vice President of the Job Creators Network.
And I'm Toni Angelini, Senior Vice President of Job Creators Network.
Today we're joined by Chris Irvine. Chris is the Managing Editor of the Washington Examiner. And he joins us today to talk about the soaring egg prices in America and Trump's presidency and response to it more broadly. Chris, welcome to Main Street Matters.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Great. So tell us a little bit what's going on about egg prices, Trump's response, Democrats trying to pin this on him, and all the scrambled eggs around it.
Yeah, it's no yoke, right? So I think what's kind of been happening, certainly the background is that there is a serious bird flu problem right now. We've seen something like 111 million chickens and birds who've been culled over the case of the last couple of years. Egg prices have continued to steadily go up in the last couple of years, and December was I think at its highest level since early 2023. Democrats have kind of been looking for an effective message to kind of bash Trump and gain a little bit of momentum back in what's been, I think, a relatively successful start to his administration. Obviously, we're still in the honeymoon period. But the Democrats, certainly some of them, had kind of zeroed in on rising egg prices being a problem and how that would affect your grocery bills. Everybody, obviously, they care what is coming out of their wallet. That's ultimately what people care about a lot. They're what the bottom line is. And they're saying, why hasn't Trump done anything to lower the price of eggs since he's got into office? Now, one could argue, hey, Donald Trump has only been in office for less than 2 weeks. In fact, I believe Vice President J.D. Vance made that very point when he was challenged on it at the weekend. He said Rome wasn't built in a day. Caroline Leavitt was asked about it during her opening press conference as well. And she seemed to sort of, put it back on the previous administration. I think it's all to say that it seems a little bit short-sighted for them to focus on something like this when it's so early in the administration, and no doubt they know it's a problem, and I'm sure they're working behind the scenes to try and get prices down and to help farmers and to help lower costs for consumers. And in a few months' time, I dare say they may succeed in doing that, which would just be Trump turning around and having another win there. So I just view it as a kind of wider problem for Democrats, that they are struggling to find their footing against Trump in this second term. A lot of their arguments aren't landing on him right now. And it's just part of a kind of wider overall trend. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think my take is that they got hit so hard for 4 years over the Biden inflation argument, the 21% inflation over the Biden-Harris term. And they felt how vulnerable they are on that. And now they're hoping to say, okay, now the shoe's on the other foot. But like you say, I think it's a little too early to make that argument. I mean, give it a little more time and maybe they'll have something more there. But at this point, I think it's too early. What do you think the Trump administration and the Republican Congress will focus on trying to do to get inflation finally under control?
Well, I think in kind of broad brushstrokes, they've talked about getting energy prices down and gas prices down. They've said that, I guess, if you can get gas prices down, then that when it comes to shipping of eggs to supermarkets should help, and the cost doesn't kind of go on to consumers. I haven't really seen kind of much in the way of them saying what they're going to do for farmers, how they're going to help replenish stocks. Are they going to introduce subsidies or what have you to try and encourage getting control of this and getting it down? I would love to see a plan, but I think there's at the moment there's a lot of kind of big picture things that they're focusing on. I'm sure, as I say, there's stuff behind the scenes, but we've not had. I think there's only been sort of 4 cabinet appointees right now, and now they've kind of run into a serious crisis with this plane crash over DC, and we might be starting to kind of see the worm turn a little bit on them having to deal with some serious problems. So I hope they can walk and chew gum at the same time, and let's see what their plan is. But the honest answer is I don't know how kind of in the weeds they've got yet.
I thought it was interesting, and I hope to sort of start to see this messaging in the future. But I mean, to sort of your point about the Biden administration, and obviously politically, Trump was successfully able to campaign on egg prices, the cost in general, of things at the grocery store, but if there was an executive order that could have been signed to immediately reduce the cost of eggs, or reduce the cost of anything, obviously Biden would have signed it. So I hope that we'll start to sort of hear that coming from the Trump administration, that there aren't going to be any quick fixes. Trump got elected because of the compounded effect of the Biden administration over 4 years. And unfortunately for all of us, there's no magic wand that he can now wave to, immediately reduce these things. And quite frankly, the other side would have used it if it existed. So I'll definitely be sort of looking to the Trump administration for more of that messaging, so that hopefully this doesn't happen. But, a year or two from now, if for whatever factors are in the equation at that point, prices haven't substantially decreased, I would hate to be going into some tight House races, with that talking point, because that's going to be the first one. Is the Republicans did nothing to have this impact. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how all of that comes down the pike. What are you looking for from a communications point of view, and also from a public policy point of view, looking into the future from the Trump administration? Some step-by-step things that they may be able to execute here to at least give Americans a sense that if relief isn't here yet, it is absolutely on the way.
Well, I think one of the things I've been encouraged about in the opening couple of weeks of this administration is they don't seem to be sort of shooting from the hip in the same way that they maybe were in 2016, 2017, when you could certainly argue they were a lot less prepared. They've had 4 years on the sidelines here to kind of get their act together, and they've come in with a plan. Now, you may not like absolutely everything that they're doing, but they absolutely have conviction around what it is they're doing, and I think that has been helpful as a kind of overall grand scale. I think a thing that I found quite impressive as well in the opening days, and again, just to kind of talk back to this plane crash that's happened today, certainly with his cabinet picks, he seems to have put an emphasis on people that are good communicators. And you can look at Pete Hegseth in defense, Sean Duffy in transportation. They have been very visible for the last 12 hours or so when this tragedy has happened, but they are getting in front of the camera, they're explaining to people where the investigation is right now, and they're communicating with people, and they're not talking down to them. I think one of the problems previously, and in particular with the Pentagon, was that Lloyd Austin really hardly ever was in front of the camera, and communication was a big problem there. And I hope that the Trump administration continues that, not just for crises and big moments such as this, but for these kind of more granular things like bird flu and getting prices down. I'm encouraged by the early start, but now they obviously have to, take that to the next step and start implementing policies. And I hope that they once they have everybody kind of confirmed in these positions, then they can really kind of hit the accelerator and get those prices down. I think the early returns though look good.
The visual of Hegseth less than 12 hours after an absolutely tragic event in the Potomac area. His sleeves literally rolled up, behind the desk, just saying like, this is what we're doing. This is what's going to happen. What a contrast to the previous administration, where we had, a cabinet level secretary who was, I believe, in the hospital for like 5 days or something, and nobody knew about it. I mean, the veil has certainly been lifted, and the optics are there, and so we can only hope that along with the optics comes some action. And so, speaking of action, is there anything in back to the bird flu? Is there anything that the administration can do to either combat this situation getting worse, or at least prevent a future outbreak?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a farmer. I certainly couldn't give the sort of granular answer there, but I would imagine that I hope that they will be consulting those on the ground, and they'll be consulting the experts there, whether it be how quickly do they replenish stocks? Do they have to increase subsidies for them to kind of encourage that? Is it a case of going in and cleaning up facilities? Or I think it all kind of probably boils back down to what can they do financially to incentivize getting the population back up? Is there more importing that they can do? I'm sure I'm probably not the best person to ask when it comes to the granular policy there, but I think it will probably all come back to the bottom line, and what can we do to incentivize the farmers and those who are kind of behind the production from getting the population back up. And can you do anything? Can you come to some sort of agreement with supermarkets as well, where maybe they're not passing on the bottom line to consumers? Ultimately, it all boils down to consumers getting hit in the wallet here. And yeah, as you rightly say, if they haven't got a handle of it in 18 months to 2 years' time, it will cost them.
Chris, tell us a little bit about the other coverage that Washington Examiner is chasing right now, and what you guys are looking forward to covering over the next year and a half.
Yeah, well, I mean, one could be forgiven for thinking there's only one story in town, and that's Donald Trump and what's happening constantly. But, we're a politics-heavy website, focus an awful lot on policy. Certainly the Trump administration and what it's going to do in the next 100 days or so is going to be a key focus for us. We'll be looking to see if the House of Representatives and the House Republicans can keep themselves together for long enough to help implement Trump's agenda. We'll be looking to see if the Democrats can sort of sort themselves out and recalibrate. I still think they're a bit punch drunk from what happened in November. We're going to see the new leader of the DNC be elected very shortly. But what is the opposition going to look like? I think a big problem right now is there's no centralized voice for the opposition against Trump, and I think that's why we talk about egg prices and why these blows maybe aren't landing in the kind of uniform way that we've maybe come to expect in the past. And so I'm interested to see what national figures are going to start putting their head above the parapet and taking the fight to Trump. Now, I think there was a big Gavin Newsom, who I think we all thought was maybe going to be the kind of leader in waiting, is on the back foot with what happened with the California wildfires. So maybe he is kind of keeping quiet just to keep the powder dry for him going forward. But I'm curious to see what happens with him going forward, with Governor Josh Shapiro and other candidates, like potential candidates like Governor Wes Moore of Maryland. I think it's what is the Democrat response going to be? That's ultimately what I'm looking forward to the game sort of resuming.
And how do you, what do you think Trump, what do you think he's going to do with his political capital he has right now? What do you think he's going to focus on maybe in the next, we've heard he's going to push one big bill, work with Congress on one big bill that has everything in it. What do you think is going to be really his focus maybe from now until summer, where he has the most political capital?
Yeah, I guess that's probably a big one. That's certainly one that he needs to figure out. The math in Congress is so tight for him, though, that they really need to kind of make sure that they have everybody on board there. And we've all seen what's kind of happened with with House Republicans in the past. I think he's going to try and deliver on what his promises are, and whether that be the border, and we've already seen the numbers come down. But can you sustain that? Can ICE continue to do what it's been doing for the first 10 days or so? This isn't something that's going to be over in a month. And does he have the discipline for it to continue? That's something that kind of plagued him before. Has he picked the right people to be in his cabinet? Again, that was a massive problem that he had before. He seems to, as I say, he has an idea of where he's going this time. Some of the sweeping stuff that he's done with firing federal officials and putting things on a funding freeze, it's quite jarring. But at the same time, he said that he was going to do that stuff. And I think that ultimately, will he follow through on the promises that he made to the electorate? And he has so much goodwill amongst his base. I think for the first time in a long time, he has a bit of goodwill for people that maybe didn't vote for him, who think, this is kind of refreshing in a, break glass in case of emergency way. But I'd be hoping that he wouldn't kind of squander any sort of goodwill that he may have with others that might not necessarily think he's, the be all and end all.
It was, it was interesting to see prior to the plane crash. It seemed like the Democrats were starting to get their feet underneath them. It certainly was giving them. I mean, you listened to Caroline Leavitt's first briefing, and you had reporters in the room asking about, very granular, specific federal programs where, our baby's going to have diapers, or you name it. I mean, they're going to dust off anything that they can find. And look, some of it is very impactful for a lot of agencies. But, at the end of the day, I mean, we were talking about sort of a temporary freeze. And as my previous experience in the nonprofit sector with an agency who supported foster children, and we've received a lot of federal funding. I got to tell you, if we were at the point fiscally that, a freeze on a Wednesday for a few days was going to make or break whether or not our, bills were paid, quite frankly, that's a very big issue for an organization. So I was really curious to kind of see how that was all going to play out. Now we've sort of put a pin in that, and obviously the media's focus is where it should be on the families and the impact that this crash is going to have on things. What do you think the next sort of potential hot button issue will be that the Democrats might try to sink their teeth into? It doesn't appear to be really landing with any of his cabinet picks, and we continue to see them go through their hearings today. But so far, nothing's really landed. Do you see anything on the horizon that might give them some leverage?
It's a great question. I would say I think I agree with you that they maybe started to find their footing a little bit with the OMB stuff, which does seem to be a bit messy at the very least, or whether it was a messaging problem that kind of went awry, or whether they tried to force through some stuff that they maybe shouldn't have. And I don't think that we fully had that conclusion yet. Now, whether the Democrats can kind of keep on that and can keep on his sort of bull in a china shop approach to government, that might be something to see. I was watching with interest the Tulsi Gabbard hearing earlier today, and I think there is some worry amongst Senate Republicans that her refusal to call Edward Snowden a traitor could be an issue there. She repeatedly refused to answer that, and that might be something that could be setting off alarm bells potentially. He's got a raft of pretty controversial picks who are up today, whether you care for RFK or Kash Patel or Gabbard or not. I mean, I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing for any of them there. So that might give them something. But it's there's also what's happening in Israel as well. That ceasefire is very, very messy, and Netanyahu, I think this morning, is delayed the release of Palestinian prisoners because he didn't like what he saw when the hostages were released today. So that powder keg could blow up at any moment. And after Trump saying that he would kind of, get a deal there, questions will soon start to be asked on that one. And haven't seen any traction on Ukraine either. So certainly on the world front, there doesn't seem to be too much in the way of positive momentum. There's also the kind of Elon Musk factor in all of this as well. He's been quiet for a couple of days, as far as I can tell, but that's sort of looming large too. So the thing with the presidency is obviously a crisis can come out of absolutely nowhere, and how disciplined will they be? How communicative will they be? And how active will they be in solving that stuff? But it's certainly fascinating to watch.
Great. Well, Chris, where can our listeners go to follow your work and your coverage and all the great stuff that's happening at the Examiner?
Yeah, well, obviously come to WashingtonExaminer.com, where you can see some fantastic writing from our amazing news team that covers the inner workings of the White House and Congress and policy and breaking news and everything in between. If you want to follow me on X, you can find me at Chris Irvine 86. And you can also follow Washington Examiner there. I'd highly encourage you to do so. We've got some great content.
Great. Well, Chris, thanks a lot for taking the time to join us today on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Please subscribe at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. We'll be back soon with another episode.